This is a response to Sir Perk and also I IPWNNEWBS50. Both questions about the Jewish version of the afterlife of heaven. I like the way that Sir Perk questions it. He says, "I'm very interested to hear what you have to say on how do you envision heaven, basically. Do you think it is a real place or just a place closer to God? Lastly, I cannot help but feel that many religious people show a certain detachment to this world, as if they are in a waiting room for heaven. Do you think this is a real disadvantage to the concept of heaven? The fact that people do not live their lives as if it is the only one they will have? Thank you again for your time." And okay, so it's interesting. The concept of afterlife in general isn't very clear in the five books of Moses. It doesn't really spell out that there is such a concept. If you just look at the straight text, without Rashi and without later commentaries. And the reason I think is, basically the concept of reward and punishment in the five books of Moses is just that. It's you'll get rain and your cattle will be fat and you'll have all kinds of physical blessings. And same with punishment. It just seems that God will throw you out of the land if you don't act in accordance with His will, and your enemies will defeat you. It talks about a very physical reality. Later in the times of the Talmud, they really got into this concept of Gan Eden, of spiritual afterlife, and what it means. The Jewish concept is basically, it says that in Gan Eden, so it says, firstly, there's a concept of Gehenna, of like a purgatory, you would translate it as, where if a soul is very attached, a soul because of the body, that is, was very attached to physical things, like eating or drinking or marital relations or things like this, physical sensations, it has to go through a cleansing process of sorts where it's stripped of these desires altogether. So it's prepared now to enjoy its eternal place in what's called Gan Eden. So in Gan Eden, what's described is basically you sit and depending on your level of righteousness and to a certain source, and you're enjoying the Ziva Shechina. Ziva Shechina means like the radiance of the female presence of God. There's nothing sexual about it. What it means is basically you're closer to God, I guess, like you say. And basically, one of the concepts is you get to go over all the Torah that you learn in this world. You get to understand a much deeper level. And there's a thing called the Academy of the Garden of Eden, and they sit and they talk about Torah all day long. The reward of a Jew is that the greatest gift that God ever gave man was his intellect, and God with the intellect gave him the Torah, which is infinite wisdom enclosed in physical reality. And the Jew uses his brain his whole life to try to decipher more and more and to elucidate further and further into the Torah and understand what the Torah says. And in this way, we understand what God's thinking in a certain respect. Even though the Torah appears to be enclosed in physical analogies, it really speaks about much more spiritual realities. And then when you're devoid of the body, as it were, and it's just the soul can now understand what it learned in this world at a much higher level. And this is the concept of the Jewish heaven. There is another thing that the other person brings up about the resurrection. So all Jews believe, all Orthodox Jews, and believe in the concept of resurrection, that there'll be a time when, and this is after the world is perfected. So first you have the concept of Messianic redemption, which the Jews believe has not taken place yet. And how we know when it does take place? When there's world peace, when there's no economic disparity, when everyone when everyone on the planet agrees that this is definitely the Messianic redemption, and there's the third temple standing in its spot, and the Jews will be able to bring sacrifices. All the Jews will be gathered back to the land of Israel, which is different than the state of Israel. The borders are different, and will be able to sit peacefully and learn Torah all day. And the wolves, it says the wolf will lie peacefully with the lamb. The Rambam says the analogy that the nations of the world won't persecute the Jews anymore. They won't kill the Jews. They won't attack the Jews. They'll live peacefully with the Jews, sensing that the blessing of the world comes to this planet because the Jews sit and learn Torah all day, and they appease their Father in heaven. All the Jews will then be, at that time, what you call religious, but it won't be a big challenge anymore because godliness will be manifested in an open way. So it won't be a concept of getting a reward for doing this. It'll just be within the level of good. How much good do you do, and how much do you learn? How much you exert yourself in your learning, and things like this. And in general, it'll be a time of global cooperation and global unity amongst man, sensing ultimately that we have all one Father in heaven, and we all want the same things in life. And now, because the technology is there, we can definitely see to it that everyone's physical needs are attended to. It's just a matter of instead of looking at our borders and our different countries and different languages and cultures, focusing instead on the fact that we're all human beings and we all want the same things out of life. So there's that. That's the first phase of the Messianic redemption. After a certain point, then there's the concept called the resurrection of the dead. That Now with this, there's, I think the opinion of the Ramban is that everyone will have to die at least once, even the ones who are living. They'll have to die to experience what death is, and then right away they get resurrected. And there's two opinions. One says that only the righteous will get. The Gemara says that anyone who died in the land of Israel automatically gets resurrected. But people that died outside of the land of Israel, if they were righteous, then they too get resurrected. It's through seemingly a painful process of their whatever's left of their corpse going underground to Israel and then being resurrected from that spot. In terms of the non-righteous that died outside the land, it's not clear if they get resurrected. And then in the era of resurrection, there's no more death anymore, and there's open manifest miracles, and things seem to be a little more supernatural. And this is all until the year. We have until the year basically 6,000 to do this on our own, to merit this on our own. It says right now we're in the Jewish calendar at 5769, so we have about 230 years left. If we don't, then it seems that it'll happen supernaturally. And either way, according to Ramban, again, the last 1,000 years is 1,000 years of reward, a physical reward. There's another opinion that the world itself will just last 6,000 years, and then it becomes a more spiritual entity without a physical reality. But that's pretty much it. Something else. So it says about your question about they live with a detachment from this world. You see, Judaism started out being a religion that was focused only on this world, and God wanted you to behave good in this world for the sake of being rewarded in this world. And it seems historically what happened was, and the Torah, even though the oral Torah was given to Moses at Sinai, but it wasn't revealed until later. But it seems that because the persecution of the Jews were so tough, and wherever they went, I mean, once they conquered the land, then they're exiled from the land. Once the first temple was destroyed, reality got very tough, and I think the rabbis wanted to show the Jews that, listen, it's not everything is in this world. Even though now we're being persecuted and now your life isn't so great, it's not the end of our hope. You should know that there's an afterlife, and there's a resurrection of the dead, and if you lost your father prematurely, if he was killed by a non-Jew for whatever reason, if he was a righteous person, he'll get resurrected, and things will get better. And there's the concept of the soul enjoying the Ziv Shechina, the female attribute of God's glory, as it were, in the world to come. But there is a mission that says that this entire world, is simply a prasdera, simply a antechamber to the world to come, and prepare yourself in this world so you can sit peacefully in the world to come. It says in the world to come, the Torah scholars sit with their crowns on their head, and they even says that the crowns will burn each other. There's a certain competition between Torah scholars. They're all righteous, but there's who is more righteous, and that will kind of burn each other, in a good way, in a positive way. It says that the competition between Torah scholars sharpens the mind. But so there's two things. There's one is you have to be detached from thinking this is the only world. Meaning, if you're not detached a little bit from this physical reality, then what stops you from disobeying God's will? If there's no concept that you see, and it says, and there's another mission, it says, it's not in our rishus. We can't explain why righteous people suffer and why wicked people prosper. We can't explain it. But one thing we can do is say that this is all there is. So you do have to be a little detached from physical reality. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't partake. You have to partake as much as you can in this world and affect this world as much as possible and try to make it a dwelling place for God in the lowest world. Like this is the start of the whole Tanya. The basis of it is a midrash in Parshas Naso, Midrash Tamchuma, I believe Parshas Naso, that God had a lust, a desire to have a dwelling place in this lowest of all worlds, in the physical reality. So that being the case, every person has to see to it that they make this place as inhabitable as possible, as it were, for God, by acting like people should act, by loving each other unconditionally, by treating each other as brothers, by not murdering, by not committing adultery, things that were given to all humanity, and so do I think it's a disadvantage to the concept of heaven? I wouldn't tell someone totally disengaged from this world because eventually they get everything back, but because then they're not living. But in terms of living, you have to live with this appreciation that it's not all here in the physical reality. That there is going to be a world to come, and there is going to be a real reward and a real punishment. And it says that these types of things. The real reward is not here. It's God can bless you physically here as much as He wants. Okay, and some people steal and they cheat and they get blessed physically. It seems, but that's not real reward. Eternity lasts forever, and the soul's experience in the body is very limited. 70 years, 80 years, 120 years. If you live a long life, what good is that? Considering the soul is eternal, and it'll have to answer for every single thing it did in this body, and it has to get cleansed of certain things. I mean, so when you start having a perspective from the soul, and the soul is eternal, then you start adjusting your behaviors accordingly. I hope this helps, and may God bless you in everything that you do. Thank you so much.